Hello everybody and welcome to Army Painting Series 10, Episode 4. We see how far we can get on these corn demons. We might be able to finish them in this episode. It might have to be a long episode. But no matter what, first thing we'll probably do is start off by finishing off the bases. Now remember, last episode we had played with this and it was confirmed. Some of the kind folks did some research and they said, yeah, it's an airbrush color, and Green Stuff World makes something along this line too. If this is not working the way I need it to later on, we'll substitute the regular fluorescent paint. We're also going to use our Flash Gets Yellow here because that worked pretty well to create the initial look of that glow right there. And you can see there's our batch that we're looking at. Now we won't need as many of the contrast paints at this point. It's really going to be the Blood Angels red and the Flesh Tear red. We're going to be mixing some of this in there. That worked pretty well to get some of the... Here, let's grab one of our finished ones, because we've got to do this stuff too. We have to get this glow onto the bottom parts of the figures, so that, like I said, that's the first order of business. That's going to be get the bases completed. Obviously we have some skulls here to do. Now don't be surprised if some of that skull color then works its way up onto these surfaces too. And we also, I think this would be at the very end though, we want to see what that blood for the blood god does for actually just sinking that down in here. Will it do that, or does it just kind of, what would you say, evaporate away and just become kind of a sheen instead of more of a collection? We'll also have to do our metals here. So we'd have the big things, your reflected light here in the bases, your metals here that are also going to have reflected light, and then your skin tones, reflected light, plus we're trying to get that some warm, cool transitions in there. And then, like I said, doing the blood effects on the bases. So we won't waste any time. You've seen the other materials used here. You know we're going to be using these brushes and contrast paints mixed with the regular GW paint. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to get in and do all the reflections here on all of these different surfaces and the bases. So we'll be right back with that. Let's start this off with our reflected light. We have that fluorescent mecha orange out there again. And now remember, we have to keep this reasonable because these are just glowing runes. It's not, we don't have a giant torch at the bottom of the figure right there, so let's try and keep that in mind. Now, this I can go over the top of it with some glazes, but you see how that's really semi-translucent right there? I know it looks super bright, possibly on camera, but there's a lot of... We have some of the substrate showing through. We'll just call it that. And just in the areas where I think there would be some reflections, we'll put a little bit. As I said, we're just going to use the natural transparency of that fluorescent paint. So we have to work much more in a liquid way here. Actually, what might be a neat idea, just popped into my head here, is we'll work a couple of these with each paint. So let me see if I can't track down some of the orange fluorescent paint. If not, then we'll just kind of go, let's see, do we have it over here? I thought I had some, but we're just going to have to go with this. I just had to move a whole bunch of my painting stuff to get ready to leave for somewhere. So a lot of stuff is now packed up. There we go. So each one of these poses slightly different, so we definitely want to have some of this reflected on the metal here. So remember when we were doing this with the other Vallejo fluorescent paint, that could be, it was almost along the lines of that dry glaze thing, where it was just really, really dry, not a lot of water, actually virtually zero water. This is sort of the opposite. And I would say this is actually much more difficult to control and work around than the other less liquid paint, the stuff that's really, really heavy. It's actually much easier, believe it or not, to get it to be more translucent, which is kind of an interesting artifact there. You wouldn't expect that necessarily. Yeah, definitely is. Definitely is going to do some weird things. So we're going to see what happens. And if I just don't like what the results are in this, I will try and track down my usual stuff and we'll use that. You just don't know until you try it. Because the other thing we can maybe do, put that over the top. So we'll go with that as it is now, and then see what happens. Because like I said, there is maybe some value in experimenting a little bit. And also keep in mind too that we can go do something like this. So here's the Blood Angels red. We'll mix some of that in there because remember the fluorescent paint is not a thing used in a vacuum. Yeah, see that? Even that changed it around. So I sort of like that. Now of course that's really more of a skin tone color there. But now that we've got it, let's just go and do that on some areas of the skin. Because see, look at how that it gave it a little more body. That's about the only way I can really describe it. It's no less liquid. It's still the same amount of liquid in there, but just, yeah, see, it gave it a little more reddishness. Look at that. See how it really shows up more on that blade? So that's more what I was looking for. So you see, we made an adjustment. Said, yeah, you know what, I'm not real super thrilled with how that was going. We either move on to something else or we just go back to the original material that we know works in a certain way. So let's compare the two. Yeah, see how one is just, yeah. So hopefully that was a useful little lesson. And see, now this is the other thing I wanted to show you. See, I'm just going right over the top of that. That was the plan once I saw how that was going on there. But I thought, well, you know what? Let's just have an even more direct comparison of what the two are like. And I like this so much better. Oh, yeah. See, that's... Well, with this, I know there's that phrase, you learn something new every day, but when you try new things every day, you learn more things. Oh, there we go. There's another painting parable. They come fast and furious now. So this is another one where we're going to have to do some reflecting of things here. But not overdo it, because the skulls, they're sort of light. Now, that's a little tricky thing too. And when people are doing the object source lighting or whatever, I don't know how many times I've seen it where the so-called reflected light is darker than the surface itself, which that's just laws of physics say no way Jose on that. That's not how that's going to happen. So what you can do is instead of trying to make your lighting color darker or whatever, you darken up what's already there. So even if it's a lighter robe or something like that, well, basically your best plan is to somehow darken it down slightly or change the the color temperature of it. Now also, what's the other thing you do? And you've seen this on other object source lighting episodes before, plenty other ones. You play with the, what would you say, a little bit of color theory here. So, now let's just use that substrate term. So the color that's underneath where you're putting your object source lighting, if that's blue or something like, or something like a teal, well, obviously anything that is red or orange or whatever, even a bright warm green, but you're just going to naturally get more contrast out of that. You won't have to work as hard to make that lighting go, woof, look at that. That really looks neat. Now, the more similar they are, well, like orange on red, now you got to fight a little bit more. And that goes into your consideration once again. We haven't had as many of the conversations about, okay, does this really save time? Or is it worth spending this much time doing this? So that might be another factor in your decision to or not to do something like object source lighting. Is it just are you going to have to fight with basically a reddish object source lighting light over something that is basically orange already? So again, it's always things to keep in consideration. And there have been times, usually it's I don't know, I don't think I've had to change too many lighting colors, at least on units or armies, because of a reason like, say like that. That's usually more just an individual figure or something. But now that also goes to the theme of your army. So you want to have this specific glow color for a reason, but then things go haywire in the colors you choose for the rest of it. So that notion of, remember, work local, think global. Yeah, you're always thinking about kind of the grand scheme of things. Well, it helps when you're working on your original plan. What is it that you want out of this army? It does really help a lot in just time and, well, potential misery, that you think in advance, going, well, do I really want to have red or orange object source lighting on potentially something that's got to be bright red? Am I just going to have to screw around too much to get that? Or am I better off with just either no lighting effect at all, or something that for some reason casts a bluish green glow on those figures? Because now, like I said, your glow, that's going to show up right away. No questions asked, boom, you're going to get some serious lighting effects from that combination. However, that might end up looking a little odd. You've got the Corn Berserk, all the orange and everything like that, but then what's around it but a lot of blue and green. And I can say, just, I've had that kind of conversation with myself as I try and figure out, well, alright, what was it, the Tomb King army that I did? Because I wanted to have a bluish green glow. I didn't want to have gold. Didn't want to have even silver. I'd seen every color combination in the world for Tomb Kings, and I was just desperately looking for anything that was different. And that's when I came upon that color scheme. And like I said, you check out the blog for things like that, because unfortunately those figures are long gone now. Depending on how much of the old Tomb King's miniatures I might still have sitting around here. I could do a few tutorials on that. There are step-by-step articles on the blog, though. Just that's supposed to be a supplement to this. Because there are just, well, there's 5 years of articles on there. Yeah, once I've done this for 5 years, well, the library should be very similar. Alright, so you can see how we're just starting to build up that orange. We got one last one for this phase, and then we'll see just how much lighter we can make it. Yes, I'm used to almost being able to do basically a dry brush with that fluorescent paint, but it's all just very different like this. This operates really differently. It's not like the other one covers much more than this. It's just that it goes on much drier. This has a tendency to want to be more of a just puddle in some areas, which is definitely not what we're looking for. So we're just getting these undersides of these legs here. And as just getting the undersides of these weapons have to hit the armored bracers, as we'll just refer to those. And that was the other thing too, is I just noticed that the GW paints, they don't really like to mix with the fluorescence, not in the way that those Reaper Clear and liner paints do. And I think we noticed that pretty quick a while back, even when we were just painting the base in the first episode. That was apparent right away that those colors just didn't really like to play together, and that's okay. But if you can't get those Reaper paints, and that is the whole point behind this exercise. There. Again, the whole point behind this is to just see if we can't come up with some kind of substitute for you on some of these things. So let's... see, I'm torn right here because there's a lot of stuff that's actually in the way that's blocking this. But I gotta give that a little hint of... just the slightest hint of it. Sometimes, speaking of those laws of physics, it's just more interesting visually to go to fudge those. We'll just say that. And sometimes you gotta take what physics gives you and then give it a gentle nudge in a different direction. That's the power of being the painter, is that you can alter those laws of physics. It's your army. You do what you want with it. That is... you're the one that's doing all of it, so you get to choose. No one gets to choose for you. Now, I guess as we talk about... one thing we haven't talked about with the army painting stuff in a while is if you are going for best painted. That's a conversation we haven't had in a while. This one won't be terribly different from some of those. But as kind of a reminder from someone who has to also judge army painting competitions a lot, you need things that are just going to draw people to your display. And while regularly painted corn demons will look nice, with blood splatters everywhere and the typical skulls and all that kind of stuff, that'll be nice. It's not that that's bad, but just think of this as far as drawing interest from farther away, from 10 feet away, 12 feet away. Because there is that whole idea of, well, okay, you look at 4 feet, 2 feet, whatever, but you gotta get them to start looking in the first place. And if it takes some kind of really dramatic effect like this to get him to just look in the first place, that is part of your calculus too, because we talked about time and how much time you're willing to spend. Are you willing to spend the time to attract that audience to your stuff? And I'm going to put out some fresh, that flash gets yellow there. So we got something easier to work with here. There we go. And just looking to get some of the stuff going here on the skull. Here, let's get this brighter too. And we can still go even brighter than this. But I need to be careful here because any of these really bright orange things, they've got to be way down here by the light source. As soon as they start wandering away up towards the top here, they just have to start to recede a bit. Let's see, something like these guys here, they're just going to draw that extra little bit of attention that the typical, okay, you're using the, was that the brass, right? That's what corn is all about. It's brass, and it's done well. It's not like it's done poorly or anything like that. It's done really well. But you've got potentially, if it's something like Adepticon, there may be hundreds of armies in the room with yours. But even a small word tournament, let's say it's 30 armies. If each person is going to spend 5 minutes looking at an army, which is probably more than a person would, at least at the start, even 2 minutes, it would take him an hour to look at all 30 armies for 2 minutes. What are you going to do from a visual standpoint, an attention-getting standpoint, to get those people, A, to want to spend that at least that 2 minutes looking at your stuff, because they don't have an hour. If you were to take all the breaks in between rounds of a tournament and factor in time of, well, got to eat something and go to the bathroom, is there an hour? There's really not. So this is part of your calculus too. If best painted slash, oh, what is that? Player's choice, I think. Yeah, player's choice, I think, is one of those where it's an award basically given out by the other players. You have to make them want to vote for yours. But you can't get them to vote for yours if they're not looking at it. So somehow you got to catch their eye. Now, some people use, speaking of lighting, they use actual lighting. LEDs, that sort of thing. I have no idea how to do that. And to me, it's just way faster to do something like this. It's way more efficient. So that's where the, what is that, the calculation of time, that currency of time, that's not in my favor when it comes to things like lighting. Now, I've done real simple lighting, and by real simple, I mean basically hiding flashlights or LED lights inside kind of a building or construction, and just they're little battery operated things. There's no wiring involved, absolutely nothing like that, because to me it's not worth spending that much time. There's other folks that would actually enjoy that, or it would be easier for them rather than painting it. They'd rather drill out parts of a figure to be able to stick a light in there, and the wiring. That would be easier for them to do, a better, more efficient use of their time than doing this. And there's nothing wrong with that either. See, we're starting to enhance our lighting on that. We'll obviously clean that up and do more. All of this is It's just saying, where should that go? Like right here, clearly that's some kind of metal chainmail there. We have to do something on that. So there's a few areas that I've missed that I gotta get the paint on there. All right. Now some of these really need to get some lighter. Gotta get some lighter areas on these. Okay. And I can see, yeah, right here I need some. And even just on the ends of some of those pieces of scale mail there. Just trying to pick up a few, yeah. And we're trying to keep this linear. Remember, that's what we're trying to do with these. So we're thinking of that as a linear highlight, not round. Don't want to make that rounded. That is just, it's something I caught myself doing years ago, and everybody's, no, I gotta make these so-called metal highlights. They have to be, now if it's round like a skull, that's different, but this is cylindrical, so I have to follow that cylinder, and that's what we're doing here. See, we just followed that line. If I had gotten crazy and went too far down under here, whatever, now it's not linear anymore. It's rounded in a place that should be more mechanical, more linear. Now I can always here. I'm going to take a little bit of this, and then we just over the top there, it knocks it down a little bit. So I think that's one thing we did notice, is that the contrast paint is okay playing with the fluorescent paints. That it doesn't mind. Okay, what else do we got here? I think, yep, there's this one last one, but we had already done a fair amount on this guy. Now the other bases in question, they just have the skulls on there. Ah, see, here's one. Completely forgot this right here. Definitely got to get in here and just hit some parts of, see that elbow there. So that is why I try to work in this way. Just not getting too far out ahead of myself on any one spot. So there's, again, the fluorescent, that's letting some of the Blood Angels red mix in with it. And I guess too, I think some people, when they think of fluorescent paint, they see those posts where somebody's shining a black light on it, and it does wild things. I mean, that's cool, but you're not going to have a black light in a tournament room or anywhere else but your own room for that matter. So that's why yes, we're using the fluorescent paints, but we're basically creating our own permanent black light. We want it to be there all the time. And that can only be done with color contrast, value contrast, temperature contrast. Like, this is going to appear just that much more on the metal surfaces because they are a far cooler, more neutral colored surface than any of the skin tones. So it makes sense that we're going to get some more contrast there, which it works in our favor because, well, with metal you want strong contrast like that, strong, hard, linear contrast. So I suppose that's another thing you can think about too, because I think we've had during this whole segment a little bit of a conversation about what is it A, mean to have the contrast, and B, how do you get that contrast quickly and efficiently? Fewer layers. Now, if you can save a couple layers of paint, well, you save a couple layers of paint, and that really adds up. It stacks up fast when you're doing whole units. So another area again where I forgot some of the, to reflect some of this stuff here. So we'll do some more. And it can always be toned down with a quick glaze. Now, if we were using the clear inliner paints, that quick glaze would probably be some clear red over the top of maybe clear red, clear yellow mixed together, and then there would be your glaze to tone that down. Okay. And now this is where, and once I finish this guy, I'll grab one of the other ones that's not on one of these bases. Well, first we want to paint some of the skulls on there, obviously, but let's... good. Here's two of the same pose. Well, relatively the same pose. Now, it could have been interesting to have some of this on here as far as object source lighting, but we don't because we got skulls there. So now this is a nice way to get some difference. It's the same unit, obviously. Same unit of guys, but now we just added that little bit of difference to it within the same unit. So the unit looks a little more interesting instead of just 10, 12, 15, whatever of exactly the same thing. Remember the Rohan series? Now there you had folks not only with different weapons, but just even different clothes. So that was a big deal. Alright, I'm just gonna... Here, let's get some... I'm just gonna throw out just some white. That's all it is. It's pure white. I'm gonna throw this out here. We'll get ourselves a little smaller brush here to work with. And let's see what we can do as far as some really bright stuff going on in our actual, the area of glow here. So see, now that is going to be brighter, because that's got to be brighter than the glow that's on here, because if it's not, that's going to be awkward. It's like, so how in the world is the lighting on the figure brighter than the light source? It would be like if you walked into a room with a candle and yet you were brighter than the candle. Maybe if you were on fire yourself, that could cause you to be a little brighter than the candle, which probably is something you're not looking to have happen. Now here I'm just looking to mark a few things while I got this color here. We're not going to do too much, but this is probably the one place where I might want these brighter, see that brighter light on the metals. Not so much on the skin tone, less there. Let's catch a few more of these runes, not too many. That was the whole point in kind of toning those down a bit. And I got some more metal here again, trying to, on the chainmail, ever so slightly find a few places to do that. So let's do that here. Look at the difference that's going to make. Now we have some real... Now we got some lighting going on, and it makes sense now that there is some light on that skull head there. Let's get there. Now I think, and this is, now I have to choose a little bit. The next phase, should it be the rest of the metals, or should it be the skin tones? And what I'm trying to judge by here is, okay, what follows that sort of that rule of thinking globally? We want to work the whole surface at once. What is going to do that? I think actually doing the skin tone next, probably the best way to do that. So I think that's what we're going to do next, is just go with the rest of the skin tone. I think it'll be handy too, because that way it'll be fresh in your mind, these warmer colors we've used here, and then seeing how the cool colors that we use, or comparatively cool colors, on the upper surfaces. I think that'll be a little more apparent. See, we're just ever so slightly trying to get a little bit of the red here, or orange red, which if need be, it can always be toned down. Here, I'm just gonna throw some of that onto there. Now, where are we at? Okay. Now this one doesn't really need, we already worked on the base there, but now we've got to get maybe a few links of the chain, maybe just one little, say a few little touches here and there. Always less is more. Definitely want to go with less. And while I've got this bright color, I might also want to do the eyes here. That can be important too, because now we're sort of setting what the lightest color on the face should be. That's a good thing too. We're just kind of setting the parameter there. Like so. Move on to the, I almost grabbed one that had a bunch of skulls on it and almost started to put object source lighting on it. The only thing that stopped me was I looked and I said, wow, I've really missed a lot of areas on that. Now, if this was just me doing my own armies, say on a regular schedule or whatever, that stuff would just be completely off to the side. It wouldn't just be sitting right around here. Another little piece of advice. Sometimes, if you're trying to do different effects on different things, maybe separate those miniatures out from the batch. Then you'll be less inclined to just accidentally grab something that's not supposed to be getting that color. Yeah, this is going to really make a big difference here. Now, I don't want to spoil. See, there's some areas where I did knock it down. I don't want to ruin that. So I'm just trying to see if I find a few of these areas. Just a few. Like that. Here we are. And it's more interesting. If they were all the exact same level of brightness, it just would get kind of boring. Really wouldn't be all that interesting to look at. Once again, need to establish sort of a linear light source on that. Poof. And we're going to do the same on this side. And we've done that mostly here. Now I need to see, I forgot a few little extra touches of orange there. Yeah, see, even here on the horns I forgot some of my lighting. Here I'm gonna actually expand some of my lighting, but then tone down other stuff that's around it. This is the last one that needs the bright orange here. And well, it really needs it because, well, we've got ourselves a flaming skull going on here. So that's providing a little extra light for us there. So maybe we can. That's why I combined it here, because I was hoping that would be a light source that would shine onto some of this type of detail stuff here. Give me a reason to have a little more lighting here. Now, like I said, we'll call this phase done for right now. I might do some more stuff off screen, just areas that I knew I could not reach, like underneath the miniature that you would never see. I could do it, but the figure would be upside down and you would not be able to see what I'm painting, and that's just kind of on a video that could potentially be long. I don't think you want to be just looking at invisible miniature parts. Okay, so like I said, we will get into the rest of the skin now. And that rest of the skin is going to mean working with a flesh tier red and probably lightening that with the, I'm going to say with the Kislev flesh. So we'll be right back with that. In this stage, we're going to feature a mixture of these two. Got that Kislev flesh, the flesh tier red, and looks like that's on the screen. So there's your Kislev, and that's mixing in with your flesh tier. And what the idea is, you got that semi-translucent thing that's happening again. And let's start to work that in here. Because see, we've got some areas that it almost turned like a brownish black right there. That was a little bit of the wildwood that got in there. So now that's where we can go in here and we sort of clean up some of any weird pooling that might have taken place. This is not all that different, again, than what we would probably do if this had been the usual Reaper clear and liners, and where we wiped away the paint. Maybe we wiped away a little bit too much in one area, or it didn't clear away very evenly. See, we're just starting to unify this. Areas where it's just too dark, now it's not too dark anymore. Here on the hand, again, another area where there's some parts like here. See, we had some unauthorized pooling right there, and we just, boom. All we're trying to do is manage that a little bit. And this seems like it's light, but it's actually fairly dark. I wouldn't even call it a dark middle tone. It's still darn near a dark. And see, like another area. This got way too dark. So now it gets lightened up, but also have to start thinking of reflecting some of that red onto the armor already. Because on the other ones where we had all the object source lighting, that, I don't want to say it made that task a little bit easier, but it made it more obvious, I suppose, where lighting should be or where some kind of reflected thing should be, for sure. And we'll move on through, and then we will just add a little more of the Kislev flesh each time. And if we work fast enough, maybe at a certain point we can even sneak in a little bit of wet into wet blending. Yeah, see, another area again where things just got too dark. Another one down in here. Yep, see, I even just have a weird little brush stroke right there. So and an area here where things got just too light on the upper surface. So we're actually, it's interesting that with the same color, one area we're lightening things up, and in the other we're actually darkening things down. But it's because we established as early as possible just sort of the outline of where each color was going to be. It's a little bit easier now to then go in and make those little alterations here and there. Again, another place right here where you just have too much dark, so we take some of it away just by adding this. And I think this will really tell you just how much darker this is. See, we can go right over the top of that and knock that down. So again, not a light color by any means. We work this around. It's interesting using the contrast paints this way. I used to, for all those that have seen the Painting Pyramid episodes, you know that a lot of Secret Weapon glazes and wash coat were used just like this. And you know, if you have the Secret Weapon ones and there's, go ahead and use those in the same way. I may try and do some videos. I'll try and dig up the old Secret Weapon washes and maybe do something like this with those. I've gotten really used to using the Secret Weapon weathering paints just, well, as regular paint. So I kind of moved away from the washes a bit because, well, in some ways, the weathering paints, they sort of took over that role. In some ways, by using the weathering paints, I could sort of get two for the price of one. It was almost as if the washes and regular paint were combined into one thing. So that would almost kind of just be recreating a product that sort of now exists. Yeah, we're going to throw a touch of the red in there. And then wipe some of that away. Now we're almost done with that sort of initial layer. This, I guess if you're looking maybe where the timing of this would normally fall, that would be in the initial glaze / shaded base coat. But as you know already, you've heard it many times, we're taking a slightly different approach on these. So we'll just work that red into there. Here's a little more. Yeah, see, we had just some weird pooling because you've got these two kind of horns or spikes or whatever they are kind of protruding through the skin there, and just the way it was sculpted and cast, it created a little bit of a pooling there. And now we just got rid of that. That's gone. See, this has got a little too yellow up there, so now we can knock that down, unify it, make it more reddish. And at any point you can always, let's say we say, it should be more yellow or orange there, whatever. Go right ahead, and we have that color sitting out on the palette. I suppose that's the difference in the wet palette too, is that you won't see me remixing a color as often. And, well, is it any different than when I use oils and the paint's just kind of there for days? Actually, well, I won't call it a wet palette, but I could experiment. I'll just use the same old regular paper palette for the oils. But if I cover it in between sessions, it could be interesting to see. It's a worthwhile experiment. I mean, you try it, and if it doesn't really do anything, it's no big deal. But now it's more curiosity than anything else. So again, we're just taking the red here, where some parts just got a little bit on the yellow side. So now we're making those a little more red. And then Let's take a little bit more of the Kislev. Now I don't want it to get too pink, so we bring back some of the Flesh Terror red. Let's go back in. And now you'll see this is where we start to actually really lighten things, because before we were just equalizing things. We were taking away any weird anomalies left over from those initial applications of the contrast paint. And I have to say I've gotten used to now, because I don't want to just abandon it and then just, okay, we tried that for a while, we'll never do it again. I've been using the contrast paint just occasionally in certain projects where it's not necessarily where it's needed, but just keeping up with it. And I've seen that it working like this, where we're mixing in the regular paints with it. Now I especially prefer it with, say, the Reaper paints or even the Pro Acryls from Monument Games. To me, that's the ideal combination. But I've tried to keep using the GW paints every so often because, well, you may want to see updated or new tutorials. Use it just the GW stuff. So I'm just trying to keep my hand in that particular game. Just bringing that up because it comes into this thing of, well, painting fast. Well, there's several ways to make painting a quicker process, and the hardest one actually is to always keep painting, even maybe if you don't necessarily feel like it. You say, you know what, I'm just gonna, I just feel like some Netflix, or I just feel like whatever else, playing a game, something like that. The more you paint, the easier it is to paint. And I know that for myself because it's a convention season is upon us again. And if I go somewhere, and even if it's just for a few days, and I'm not painting during those days because of whatever the event entails, or even, well, say Gen Con, where I'm going to be painting in the Badger booth, well, I'm painting, yes, but I'm basically only working with the airbrush there. I'm not doing this. When I come back from that, it will take me days to get back to the peak of efficiency that maybe I had when I left. And that's from a person who does this every single day for a living. So for you guys that are not doing this for a living and you just want to get your armies painted, you wonder why things don't go quite as fast. That can sometimes be why, is that it's just been so long since you last painted. And that's I'm not trying to admonish anybody or anything like that. It's just something that I noticed for myself. Like I said, I'll be basically painting the entire time I'm at Gen Con, but probably not with a regular brush like this. And it's going to take me some time just to get that touch back. It's not like you've forgotten anything. It's just so much of this is about feel. You know, that having the brush in your hand, knowing just how much to relax your hand, to relax your grip, or the opposite. Or just even that idea of, okay, I've got this color here, the timing of stuff. That's it. It'll really affect your timing, maybe. Whereas before, that long gap in between painting sessions, you could have done a lot more wet blending. you come back and it's a lot harder. So I guess too that is another thing when you say, man, I don't have it today. What's wrong? Well, also maybe factor in, man, it's been a couple weeks since I last even touched a brush. And now, I mean, there is just cut yourself some slack. Don't beat yourself up too much because, well, your body's not quite back into the swing of things yet, and you just need to give it some time with the brush to get it back. See how that also starts to get just that much more opaque with each addition of a little more Kislev flesh. And you wonder, okay, what's the deal with the Kislev flesh? First of all, it's a color I just happen to have. But it's kind of our maiden flesh, right? You're looking for Reaper substitutes. It's not just substituting the clear liners. We're pretty much using that Kislev flesh as our maiden flesh. Now, I do also have, and I'm going to look at that. That's the Screaming Skull, that sort of bone-colored stuff. Sometimes I'm using that as my maiden flesh. So in some ways, I actually have just a few more of those off-whites to choose from here. Now, what I don't have, at least in the Games Workshop range, just sitting around here, is something to function as that bluish white off-white. What is that? Maggot white. That's what it is. So I don't have basically a maggot white in GW colors. So I may have to find some other substitute for that. So again, that area there that just got so dark because of just the way gravity worked and the initial washes and such, now it's light. You can't even tell that there was any paint ever pooled there. And it's weird, I'm so used to, after all the other ones, seeing the bright object source lighting on these. All of a sudden now that's not there on these couple of guys. It's wait a minute, did I forget something here? Alright, hopefully, yeah, I think this has all been pretty much on camera for you. There we are. And it's no problem toning this down. Sometimes it's almost easier to work a little bit lighter and then tone it down. That's not always the case, though. It's not going to be the case every single time. Now, what we're going to do is we'll just add a little bit more of the Kislev. And that was ever to get, let's say, too pinkish. Then I could maybe go with the Screaming Skull. But you can see there's just a little bit of yellow in this. It looks extra yellow on screen right there. So just a touch more. But because we still have that Flesh Terror red, it still maintains a bit of translucency, and that is really the key. And now this is, I suppose, closer to the traditional, in air quotes, layering. Except we're still using a paint that is not 100% coverage. With each of these little things, we get more stuff, more of these little areas start to stand out here on the face, around the eyes here, ears. Let's do some on the knuckles here. Just like that. Work on our next guy here. I also have to not go too light on this, because then it will start to look pink. It may not be actually pink, but when you compare it to other areas, you might go, ooh, geez, what happened there? How that get so pink? Now, I believe the next thing we'll do, we'll work on those blades after this, or on the weapons and these the bracers and such. We'll hit those next. And I think after that, then we'll do things like the horns. And actually I think, well, I say it might be a longer video. We might just do the blood effects here. Now, that begs the question. I'm just, again, still proceeding with this lighter version of the Flesh Tear Red Kislev mix. Does this mean that the contrast paints made things go faster? You say, well, yeah, it's only 4 episodes. It's 4 episodes, but what did we not have to do? We don't have to worry about any kind of flock. There's no snow effects. Now, the bases maybe took a little bit longer to make in the beginning than probably the, let's say, Series 9, the Rohan bases. Yeah, just getting a little more of the, again, this lighter red there. And I'm starting to wonder, because this is the first unit that I've done with contrast paint. So how was I really going to know, do they make things faster or not? Because the live sessions are just, they're different. They're not structured like this. So harder to tell. And the 2 oil painting series that we've done, each one of those, 4 episodes. Now, I guess you have to then figure in, so the Easterling, well, we had cavalry there. So we're also painting horses. We're not just painting the same red guy over and over again. The halberdiers, and we're talking sky earth, non-metallic metal on every figure, and freehand, and the fancy basing. So that's why I'm more inclined to say, well, no, I don't believe they're the same kind of time saver that oil paints are. Because this stuff, well, it's still going to dry. The oil paints potentially would still be wet over the course of the entire painting process. These are not really. I've had to, well, yeah, some of them have definitely dried out, even in the wet palette. Because I guess that would be, I just trying to anticipate questions, because I've already been asked this. Do they think the contrast paint speed things up? And it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Some things maybe do go a little bit faster because of the contrast paints. But is this really all that different from what you've seen me do with the Reaper paints? It's kind of the, well, it certainly is kind of the same idea. It's also the miniature types too. Maybe it's just these poses are a little bit simpler, but then the Rohan ones were relatively simple also. And I know it feels like this is some kind of colossal sidebar, like why in the world is he talking about this? Is it worth it to you? This is the thing. Let's say you can get both. You have your choice. You're not in one of those areas where now you've got to just figure, okay, I can't get the Reaper stuff, so I got to use this. But you're in the US, you have a choice between both. One jar costs you $4, the other one costs you $8. And without a doubt, I can say that you use up a fair amount of these contrast paints if you're going to use them in the way that creates the most efficiency, you use up those paints really fast. Much faster than you would just ordinary paints. Now I could look at my liner paints and see how fast I'm going through those, and maybe I need a bit more of a controlled experiment on that. This is the last guy we're doing this on, and I may just go one more hit, put a little more Kislev flesh in. I think I'll just grab my smaller brush. So I'm gonna grab my original ones here too, just to double check, see what we got. So yeah, we definitely want to go one step later as I look at that. And yeah, okay, we do have some out here. Might even just to have it out here, I'm gonna throw some out there too. Alright, now let's get some, I don't want to say final highlights or anything, but let's just, yeah, I'm going to get even more of the Kislev in there. It's going to make it more opaque too. Yeah, I just needed, that's what I needed. But because, see, that the semi-translucent nature means that some of those broader areas, like over the chest, and even over that deltoid, see, I can just gently brush that on. It's not quite so obvious that there's a bit of a difference between those colors there as far as light and dark goes. Yeah, so let's get this, some of the knuckles here. And just, again, if the highlights on the skin, especially on these guys that have the object source lighting, if it's lighter than the reflections, well, the reflections are just they're not gonna carry. You're just gonna go, wait a second. Is that reflected light? What's going on? So we're just trying to pick out a few cheekbone. The lips there, maybe a few spots on the arms. Because we don't want to lose that deep, that's part of the whole corn demon thing, that really deep red. And we'll lose that if we let these highlights get too intense. Okay. And every so often, and I can use more water to thin this stuff down because we got a whole bunch more regular paint in there. I suppose I could use the contrast medium, but I'm basically trying to stay away from that because, well, first of all, it's just so hard to get. Maybe in a month or two, everything dies down, not so hard to get. I'm assuming that will be the case. I do remember, what was it, the Nuln oil and the, oh, not so much the Reich's shade, oh, what the heck was that called? I even have a jar of it somewhere. Reich shade flesh tone or something like that. That was one that could be hard to find sometimes. And then of course the Devlin mud. So I don't know if the contrast medium is the new Devlin mud or not. Probably Wildwood is. But even there, if you can't find that, just taking the, you can take the Flesh Tear red and that Warp Lightning green and probably combine them to make something that's not too shabby. Alright. Yeah, I don't want to, well, I keep thinking I don't want this cooler highlight color here too close to where the base is, and then I realized no, there's nothing glowing on this base. Yep, knuckles here definitely have to be a little bit lighter, but we've got to balance that off with that notion that the lighting underneath it, we don't want to kill that. And for the metals, let's see, we used the Space Wolves gray there, and certainly Leviathan blue, but we'll probably be mixing the Leviathan blue with our other off-white there. That'll be the Screaming Skull. And in some ways, it's going to be an awful lot like what we were just doing here on these skin tones. And you can see how much lighter this is now than when we first started, where it was practically straight up. Oh, what is that? The Fleshed Hair Red, which is a pretty dark red. I mean, you can even see in the palette some of that next to this lighter version that I'm working with now. And I also had to double check to make sure, do we have that, the corn symbol, was that also glowing? I think it was in our color test figures. I think it was. I just gotta check that out. I'll just do that in between segments here real quick. It's not like we'll be worrying about that next, but alright, where are we at? We just got a couple more of these to go before we get to those weapons. And it's going to be a whole lot of this, except, well, it's really no different here. We have to think not competing with any sort of object source lighting on there. We can't make the regular highlights stronger. And it's tough. You can just be absent-minded. And, well, here's the other thing, too. And this happens to all of us. It happens to me because I've got so many different projects and stuff. Sometimes you walk away from something and you're coming back to it after days, maybe weeks or whatever, and you sort of forget where you are or what you were going to do. I guess it doesn't always hurt to just maybe make yourself some notes. You have a dry erase board next to your area, or maybe you go on your phone and do the notepad thing or WordPad or whatever it is on your phone, where you can just kind of give yourself a little bit of a list of things that you meant to do next. It's not like you have to follow that religiously. It's just not bad to have that little reminder. And I believe this is our last, yep, this is the last one here that's getting these lighter flesh tones, and I can go one or two more levels in some places if need be, especially on the face, and there I might add more orange just to deliver a little more interest. Alright, so what we're going to do now, we'll get out some of our blues, and we're going to start to mess around with our blades next, so we'll be right back with that. Here's that combo we're talking about, the Screaming Skull and Leviathan Blue. There's going to be other stuff that works its way in there too, but let's see what we got here. So this is your straight up, there's your Leviathan Blue, and you can see this is pretty much the original. That's what we originally used there to get that a little bit darker. What I'm going to do is go through this and maybe reinforce some of my darks before I, see like here, there's some darks that needed some reinforcement, but I'm also, and I know we talked about, well, we're working on weapons and stuff, well, I'm also going to hit some of these areas too. or I say I need to add some dark or whatever. So let's just do that. And let's see if I've got I got enough of it here. Might even throw some of the Leviathan blue on some of the bases here even, just to cool things down a bit. Here, I'm gonna over this batch of hair. I needed to get some more dark in there. And not just dark, but I had temperature-wise, I had to cool it down. So it does both. And it as I've said before, you're adding another layer of complexity to your contrast. Makes it less boring. So we talked about drawing people in, right? We want people to come in, we want people to see it. We want people to basically look at our gallery of miniatures. Now you attracted their eye, but you gotta keep them there. Now how do you keep them there? This little bit of sophistication in the shadows. Ooh, there we go. There's another term. It's another little fun term. Instead of just the obvious stuff, where it's just a darker version of this in the shadows, where it's something that has sort of an opposite to it. Like here, this blue, you would not think that using a blue to shade red, you think, it's going to make it purple. It's not really making it purple. Not really making it purple. It may, just on its own, out of context, give it a little bit of purple, but because of what we have around it, not so much in the pro, just darker. Because the wildwood just made it kind of a darker red. This starts to give it almost a bit of a burgundy look. But you can see I'm still, every so often I see a weapon like here. I'm going to say I want that to be more of a solid dark like that. We're going to go back in later, but for the moment I just needed that to be a little more solid here. Let's maybe see, we're going to, by adding this bluish color, it doesn't look like blue whatsoever, but that starts to look more intense and more orange because we've added this blue away from it. Okay, what about you? We'll reinforce that a little bit. I also have to look and see, did I just go with straight up metal colors? I have to look at the symbols on the... Yeah, okay, so I did put some... I'm going to look at the other one here, just double check. Yep, so that's something to keep in mind, is that those extra little doodads definitely need to get something that's more of a yellow color. But we'll do that, or something that's more brassy, but we'll do that after we take care of our Leviathan blue / Screaming Skull mix. I felt like I needed to darken down some of that, not just the metals. Now let's start to mix the Screaming Skull with the Leviathan here. And as I just mix them together here so I can just go lighter, cooler. And this starts to do some of that same, because it's semi-translucent, so it sort of equalizes the color where there might be some splotchiness. Now we have less splotchiness. Just a few brush strokes, bam, less splotchy. Same here. It's not as big of a deal to just try and get the absolute perfect shape. We got the lighting on the other side. And we're just going to work our way through all of these. And I have to remember now, don't bother putting any of this on this stuff. The symbols basically that are on each of the weapons. And you can see we got more of this linear stuff going on here. So we're trying to keep that in mind, but all the while working with this semi-translucent color. So see how that, look at how that equalizes that. Same thing here. Because we can still build this lighter and lighter. This is like that first layer of that flesh tears red, remember? That we did, that was mixed with a little bit. There you could see a real obvious, just kind of a hole right there. And so now it almost looks like that's all just one brush stroke or one glaze or whatever. But you notice we don't have to do a ton of this because we tried to take some care early on with how the metals were laid out. So it's again another way to save time. It's when you have more of a controlled mess, it's weird because you don't want to be too fussy about things, but you also want to have control. Sometimes it's hard to remember to do the control thing because what comes in your mind first and foremost is just getting the darn thing done. Sometimes that can that evil spirit can take over and control your hand, and you go a little bit too far. Okay, I just looked at that and said, well, wait a second. Where's the glow on the backside of this thing? Well, there is none. I think, too, that some folks, they'd say, well, wait a second. A bunch of these semi-translucent layers, couldn't you just cover it faster with opaque ones and the whole thing would go faster? I think what this is showing is that it is actually faster to glaze first and opaque later. That's another unusual little saying there. Alright, now we're getting into our next. Yeah. And what I may even do is get a little bit of green in here too. Just in a few places so that it's not endless shades of the exact same bluish gray. Like we said, we're trying not to make this visually dull. Yeah, okay. I also have to think, okay, where is light going to hit this? Especially these guys here that don't have that, they're not walking around with their own light source. So while it adds the interest, that's the interesting part of trying to make a few guys in the unit a different color like this, or just dramatically different with their bases. You can't quite turn off the brain. You have to keep the brain in the game and always be thinking. So as I do the swords there, or the axes, think about the chainmail, the bracers. It was one of the reasons why I let those bracers and other elements just be essentially a steel color, because I thought it would be a little bit faster getting through everything if I didn't have too many different colors and metals to worry about. Also, well, gee, you can imagine, don't need me to tell you that the cooler colors of this metal are going to show off the orange glow a whole bunch better than, let's say, if everything was more the brass type color. And also, because I've got this blue, the reds become more intense. So that's why, even though, I mean, you think that's just kind of a pinkish red there. That's not super bright or deep or whatever by itself. But when you pop it next to this cool steel color, now we're working along that same principle of we're using that contrast of hue and color temperature. We're actually dulling one color to make another color brighter. We're cooling down one color to make another color warmer. Because remember, if I kept going with just more and more of that light color, these guys, they would be pink. They would be more like demonettes or whatever. They'd be more Slaanesh than corn. Just, I think probably the next layer down, might grab myself one of the smaller ones as far as brushes go. And then what we'll do is, after doing all of the more of the bluish steel, then we'll try and get these symbols. But I think you noticed when I held up some of the ones that had the glow on there, be darned if that glow didn't show up very much wherever these things were more of a yellowish color or not the blue steel. That is the dramatic effect that the whole temperature thing can have. I need a little bit more of this, so. Alright, once again, gotta keep thinking linear here. We have to think in some ways reflected light in these areas too. Now, there's just no way to make everything, especially on a bunch of demons running around, to make things realistic. I always just get a chuckle out of that. Well, that demon prince, that doesn't look very realistic. Okay. If you can point out to me how many of those things are actually walking around, then we can start talking about actual realism. There has to be that balance between artistic license and just going a little bit overboard with, well, it's got to be real. Because sometimes real is boring. Now, this, we're going to go into the screaming, so a little bit more here, lighten this up some more. I suppose that's why most shows or entertainment is fantasy and origin, because too realistic or whatever is too mundane. I've seen science fiction miniatures painted almost too realistically to where they were super boring to look at. And when you painted them in more of a, and I'm not going to use the word comic book style, just in a more stylized way or whatever, they actually looked more like the genre. They looked so much better not being realistic. So we're just, see now you can see we're starting to creep towards these lighter colors, but if I have too much on the brush, I can get rid of some of that. Okay. And I'm not going to go into putting blood on the axes themselves. Maybe if I wasn't doing the object source lighting and that sort of thing, maybe we do the blood on the axes of the guys that are running around on the skulls. Like I said, I haven't tried that blood for the blood god yet, and I have not haven't messed with it at all to test it. We'll take it out of the container and we'll see what the heck we get. I have no idea what that's going to be. And if you wondered why, what's with the screaming skull? Why something that's almost like a yellow trying to highlight or lighten a blue? Well, that's because I wanted it to become more of a gray rather than just a lighter blue. Because the yellow that's in there, in effect, grays it down because you're talking about opposite colors. You're using an opposite color yellow basically to lighten and highlight a white, but yet it doesn't turn green. It doesn't turn green because, believe it or not, there's just enough red in that Leviathan blue to keep this from turning green. I know that all sounds kind of complex and weird. I try not to get too much into the whole art thing or the 2D art, and that's why I try not to use too much in the way of terminology or whatever. So I try to just come up with my own phrases for things. Okay, yeah. And you can see we're starting to, that's all starting to take some nice shape there. Alright. And all the while, it's just a semi-translucent. See right here, it's not going to be too much there because we have cut down on the opacity by default by just, instead of taking some other regular blue paint. Oh, and here's the other advantage too. It makes it thinner because it is contrast paint. By default, you're sort of thinning your paint already. We're getting there now. And I think it's about that time where we can say, what have we not used yet? We haven't used any white, and we're still going to hang on to that. Still not going to dive into the white yet. I see there's some parts of this here that really never got hit with any kind of initial. Yeah, there's still that from the very beginning, our first layers of paint there. And as now we'll jump into that final layer. I think I will grab my Winsor Newton brushes to get into that. So they're also thinking the same linear thing there. Alright. We'll get our somewhat smaller brush in here. We'll grab a little bit more of the screaming skull. You can see that's not even white. Look at how much lighter we can still go here. And now this is where we start to do these kind of things. It's not really an edge highlight because we're not going the entire length of that edge. We sort of go and then we stop. Just taking a little bit of that here. Now you really see those linear lights start to take some hold. Let's see, can you see this? Sorry if I'm shaking the camera there a little bit. Just the nature of these guys with those weapons, they're sticking out like that. It's a little hard to see. So I apologize that this one's just a really long episode here, but it just makes more sense if this one's a little bit longer than having this one be sort of long and then some really weird super short episode. So just bear with me. Now we definitely want to get something like this on the other side here. Can you see that? I think so. Just like that, and then stop. There. Actually, what I'm going to do is those symbols that are there, we'll just paint those up with the horns, because I just realized that it's essentially going to be the same type of colors. So that just makes sense. And it bolsters that whole notion of that efficiency, where we're using a specific, we got that color just on the brush, let's go take care of a certain area while we got that color on the brush. And again, right there, just that, see that little bit of line of lighter colors. We'll do it right here along this. So we start here. And I'm just gonna, I needed a little bit more of that, so I mixed a bit more. There, probably it's starting to look a little bit almost like it's sky earth color there. We're trying not to necessarily do sky earth per se. And that same going right down the line there. Now let's get that here. We're just going to take that lower section there. And do the same here. Let's see, is there any other? Yeah, yep, here's another one. Almost forgot this area. That's it. Now what I'll also do is in between, I'll check out the axes that were already done on our color test figures and see just how we're doing, how close are we to these. And I will say that there have been times where I've gone back and altered the color test figures, and this is like in my own armies and stuff. I said, well, that was the original plan, but now you've got these figures that may not necessarily match. If you didn't follow your color test figures very exactly, well, what do you do with those? I've gone back and I've just adjusted them a little bit, make them match the rest of the army. That's not horrible. And this one, now you really see it. Now the reason it's not doing the sky earth is because we don't have a dark horizon right next to that. We've left it still a little bit more towards a middle tone. And we gotta do the same thing on the opposite side over here. Now, yeah, we got someone. Now, I don't want to get this too light down in here because, well, where would that highlight be coming from? There should be no reflections from above, or no light from above and no reflections from below. That's the same kind of principle over here. Now, this is a little more open. this is our last one here. And then what I'll do is I'll get into some of the lightest lights on these axes just real quick. Yeah, this one's, well, I'll go back in probably with a few little glazes on some of the chainmail bits there. And I've got to, yeah, see, there's going to be my one line there, another line over there. See, we're, can tell actually trying to squish out the brush here, and I'm kind of using the side of it. And now this is going to be mostly the Screaming Skull. Yeah, Screaming Skull. And now we're just going to try to get a few broken lines like this. See, it's not continuous. There's interruptions in it. And we'll get the spikes there. And if I feel the need, like I really have to get some kind of brighter highlight, I can always go in there with white. But it's an option that's left. It's not one that I've already expended. You know, that is definitely something I like to just kind of have in the back pocket there. That little bit of extra ammo. And see, like again, we're not doing a sky earth thing because we're not hitting this right next to where that horizon line would be. We'll do that here too. Yeah, these things, boy, they are tough to hang on to because spikes keep hooking onto my glove. And they're super top heavy. They are really top. Just the nature of these things. I guess even if they weren't metal, they'd probably still be top heavy. Let's get that same little bit of a line right there. Let's get actually a little bit of light on that skull. Whoops. Didn't mean to mix that in there. Gonna get this down where you can see it, and now we'll do this again. The same line that then breaks and then sort of reforms down here. And this one, I really want that to be my brightest one there, and then we don't do them down on the bottom end because, well, first of all, that's where we want our reflection to be. This is the fewer of those we have, the more impact each one has. Alright, so this is the last one here with our brighter, or the final highlights here. Or are they? But what we'll do is we'll get into the horns, stuff like, well, maybe the teeth or whatever, all the kind of stuff that has that yellowish type color. All these little symbols on the axes, we'll do that too. And I just got a couple more of these things to do. So we'll be right back again with the horns, these little symbols on the axes and such. So we'll be right back with that. I think I'm going to use a combination like this to get a few, well, the brassy type elements here. Because the snakebite leather, as we've learned, it's a brown, has a little bit of green to it. So I'm going to show you what happens when you mix it together. This is down here in the corner. So that's the snakebite leather there. It's the flesh gets yellow. You mix them together. And when you see it next to the orange there, see how it just has a little bit of a greenish tinge to it. Let's see what happens once we start to put that down in a few places. So I'm also going to use some of it on the horns, but we'll also use some of it on these symbols here. And I can glaze over the top too. Now let's say I just want it to be a little bit different. We'll have a little more of the snakebite leather. Get into that. See, it starts out a little bit on the darker side. Let's get, yeah. See, we're equalizing the color again, just like we did on the skin, just like we did on the axes. When you put that first layer in, the idea is we're putting down a color, but what we're trying to do is take away some of the roughness that those initial glazes left us with. And I know I keep mentioning the old painting pyramid episodes, but one of the reasons why those were put up there over the last year or so, year plus, is because I know I was working on all these new ones, and I thought a couple things. It could be really helpful to see where all these things came from, and just something like this, where we're sort of revisiting those older techniques, but with newer materials. I thought that could be, somehow there could be value in that for you. So that's why I threw those up there first. I know they're older, and there's now a lot of the principles are still exactly the same, but I know some folks they get caught up in process details. So I'm sorry if that was a little bit confusing for you to see the difference in those, but I just thought you're changing in many ways what you do to add this to it. So I thought, well, I can show you that process of addition. It's not an impossible process. It's not really difficult either. So see, we're just gonna drop that in there, but at the same time, I'm hitting some of these other things. And it is that same thing, especially where you've got these spiral horns here. I'm just trying to get the best angle at this. That's more like it. Yeah. And I'm tempted to even go a little bit greener with that now. This will probably be, I'd say, in the final details phase. But what I was hoping to do, because the blood effects aren't going to take very long. I mean, there's only two bases to worry about, so that's not going to take a tremendous amount of time. What I want to do is get a little bit of turquoise in the blades here of the axes, and just on some of the steel metal in general. I noticed that I was looking over the couple of test figures that we did, and I'm guessing that Achillean green should probably get us there. Probably Achillean green mixed with the skull white. So we'll try that mix. But you can see we even get the skulls here a little bit. Just a touch there. Okay, what else do we have? Yeah. Now we got a symbol over here that we wanna. Another one up here. On the other side. And I really like the way this does that. It sort of gets rid of some of that roughness. There's another one definitely going to be helped by that. It levels out all the texture. It's imagine that you just poured a bunch of dirt into a garden or whatever, you're going to plant your grass or something like that, and you've got this big pile of dirt there, it's all rough and uneven, then you take that garden rake and you level it out. That's a little bit like what we're doing, especially here on these horns, where they're just, things got a little bit rough, or in some cases where the brush just hit something that shouldn't. So that's it's a simpler way of fixing it than just having to, you see at the time, oh my gosh, I messed something up there. It's like, not that big a deal. You fix it when you fix it. So you can see this is fairly dark here. Again, just gotta spin that around so you can see it. And there, again, in some cases you got a situation where I got lighter much faster than we wanted, and then other situations where all of a sudden just it was nothing but dark. Here's one of these. Okay, on this side too. Once again, just trying to equalize a few things. Maybe even throw a touch of this down into our skulls here on the base. And at this point, also, how much you refine this. Maybe just skip this step entirely. You just say the heck with it. I don't have time. I don't really need to do this because I'm not looking to win a best army painted or something like that. It's not the goal. And as you saw, and we've done this in the last one of these tutorials here, these army painting series, by episode 2 even, well, episode 3, sorry, because episode 2 is usually a color test figure. By episode 3, you have a unit that you just don't necessarily mind putting out on the table. Now, it's not horrible or anything like that now, and so instead of going with more yellow, you can see we're going with that white, and this is where you're going to start to see even more of that green come out. It moves it away from the yellow. It has a little touch of the greenishness in it. Alright, can you see that? Yeah. And then if it gets too late, I'm going to go back in with some more of my snakebite leather, and it doesn't just darken it down, it also makes it a little more translucent. So I could spend hours more off camera just smoothing some things out, and that would be more where I'd like to go with it. But even just recently with some of my own Song of Ice and Fire stuff, there's things where I've gone back in later and cleaned up a bunch of stuff because I didn't have time initially for whatever reason. I went back in there and said, yeah, I can fix up this edge a little more, or I'm going to go back into the midtones and throw a little purple into that metal. There's nothing that says, okay, you got the army ready for that event, for whatever, and event's over. You can take your time a little bit. Maybe you go back in there, maybe even add a little bit of extra freehand or something. I know some people, when they're done with an army, they're done with it. They don't want to see it anymore. They're sick and tired of painting it. That's okay too. I can completely understand that. For my own stuff, that tends to not really happen. There's commission projects that get that way, where you've just said, okay, I painted this type of thing an awful lot, and since you don't also then have the interest of seeing it out on the table, well, you don't quite get that sort of anticipation of a reward down the road. So yeah, that's why I'm really glad there is such a thing as the army painting series, because that otherwise I would not have any armies again, which I, I really am still trying to get through some new ways of, say, filming terrain tutorials, because that, well, kind of goes hand in hand with the army painting. Now, if you check out the blog, I've got a bunch of, and I mean a bunch of terrain tutorials in there. So be sure to check those out because, well, first of all, they could potentially be really helpful. There's fantasy, sci-fi, sort of realistic terrain for my World War II stuff. And I need so much more terrain for other things coming up. So that's why, and I've always enjoyed it. Heck, there's times where I almost enjoy the terrain more than the miniatures. It's the challenge of trying to create an environment for the miniatures that it looks like they belong in it. And if you're putting that much work on your figures, and maybe not everybody sees it this way, but if you're going to put enough work into your figures where it's hours per miniature, wouldn't you want to play on some nice terrain as opposed to maybe just, I don't know, some cardboard pieces or whatever? Now, there are some really nice so-called cardboard 3D terrain. I've seen a few. There's another new Kickstarter, I guess, that's coming up for that, and it's obviously much nicer than it was in the early days, technology and such. So I do hope at some point to get some companion terrain tutorials to go along with these guys. Okay. I guess, actually, well, who knows? Maybe I'm just thinking of what kind of terrain would go with these guys. Some kind of a portal or gate or something like that. Obviously, maybe foam and plastic card or something along those lines. With obviously the corn symbol there. Well, plenty of skulls, because, hey, skulls. Gotta have skulls. There. So what I will do now is grab the smaller brush, and we'll drop a few hints of that green in a few places, and then some more highlights on top of that. So we're going to stop with that. Grab a smaller brush here. And I know the Achillean green, that's this here. Don't need a bunch of it. It only takes a little. I'm just going to put a few little drops out there. That's all I need. And when we mix this with some of our lighter colors, yeah, here's a little bit of my screaming skull that's going to go in there. So let's have a few different colors of this. And then let's get over by our metal, see what we got. Right there. So what it does, it's not just making things lighter. You see, we've shifted that tone a little bit. We've added just one more extra level of color to that. It'll just make it that much more interesting. Because if it's all just the same purplish gray, It reminds me a lot of, not, what was that? Oh, not Space Wolves Gray, Shadow Gray. That's the old GW color. So that was essentially, yeah. Because I was just looking at the other ones, and that's what was in there. And we're even going to throw a touch of that on there. You can see it doesn't require a huge change in it. It's just we're adding one extra little accent here. That's all it is. Can use, yep, that's in a good spot for you to see right about there. And because it has just a touch of that translucency, it's one of those things. Remember, green is the opposite of red. So if we can get even this turquoise, which is kind of a green, and you start to work that in next to that red, what do we get? We get another one of those, oh, what would you call it? A contrast shift right there. It's not color shift, but it's a contrast shift. And I only put that on the top. It distinguishes, again, see, now that we've got that more of a bluish thing, it distinguishes this slightly, just a touch more. And there. That was a nightmare of trying to get any kind of a carving tool in there, whatever. There were just mold lines galore in there. And I want to get just a touch of this up here, so I can even wipe it away. Or use my finger to sort of scumble it in there. Then what I'm going to do is, after I've done this, the plan is to take a touch of it, mix it in with our yellows and such, and maybe even, nope, not on that side, I want to do it on this side, and maybe even get a little bit of green in there on these guys. It sort of encourages that notion that they are more of a brass rather than a gold. And this is that extra touch. Maybe, like I said, if you're just playing in a game, I don't think if you were to show one of these next to the other, one that has this Achillean green mix at it and one that doesn't, most likely the person who's playing it is not going to notice the difference. But there is something to be said for, it's there. And eventually, just the closer it's looked at, let's say you further down the line, you think a contest, okay, there's now that Golden Demons are back at Adepticon, and you're looking to do Golden Demons for units like I did for many years, well, those are the kind of things that judge are going to see that and say, oh, look at that. Because I'm pretty, I forget, because I did the fantasy and 40k units all the time. It was my favorite. Oh, I see I got to add some of my yellowish over that. There we go. Just a real quick thing, and we'll accent that in a second. Just got a couple of more of these to hit with that Achillean green mix. First I thought there was an R in there, but there is no R in Achillean green. Who'd have thought? Okay. See, even here, I might just... couple little accents. Nobody's even going to really notice they're there. But just overall, it makes a little bit of a difference. It contrasts not only with the skin on your demons, but also your fire and such, your object source lighting. Now let's, I believe, yep, this is the last one we're doing this on. And then, okay, now we want to shift this more towards, say, a greenish. Well, here's yellow. The yellow gets in there. Don't want it to get too greenish, so I throw in just a touch of that darker red. That's essentially your flesh tears red. Let's make sure a little more of that gets in there. And here is the plan. We throw a little bit of that into here. Not going to make as much of a difference where there's not the deep texture, but see, we throw it into here now. And that's the idea of getting it to be more like brass and less like gold. Here, I think, yep, you can see that. And I'm going to get these wrappings here. Just, again, a couple of the touches. Keep it away from just being another form of yellow. But see how we've changed from, you can see, from one set of horns to the next. We could have continued to go more, well, I guess bleach bone would have been the color in the old days. Could have continued to go on with more of the, basically that yellowish skull white color, but we chose to make that, I think, a little more interesting. Let's do something along those lines here too. It's that little bit of a surprise with the color, something unexpected. But the thing is, it's subtle enough that the eye, it doesn't disturb the eye. Eye doesn't go, whoa, what the heck is going on there? And just a couple of these, the skull, speaking of these other skulls. But once in that final detail thing, what we'll do is we'll start out with the blood effect, see what the heck happens. And then we'll move on from there. We'll probably add to the blades here. We'll just take that last bit of white in places and maybe add some final light tones to the skin on these guys. Alright. I think these skulls, I want to get those a little bit less yellow. This one too. See, I even take my finger and just remove some of it. And those skulls are from Green Stuff World also. Remember those. Actually, let's get a little more of the yellow in there. We're not quite down to palette sludge yet. We almost got there. Okay. Just moving him into position. And we're going to do a few odds and ends once again. We're using something besides just a yellowish white to highlight the horns. Horns and spikes. I guess we'll just refer to those as spikes. oops, I think we need a little more light here. Oh, look at that. It's even good enough to use as for metals there, regular metals. Okay. I got the coin symbol here. And you see how we're focusing on the... We're going to put our bright highlights up here. And we lighten it down there. And now I got to do... This one's got a whole bunch of these spikes and horns. Let's do his spiral horns here. I also have to double check and see if we put pupils in the eyes. I don't know if I did. I think I did, but I'll double check. Most important thing is get these guys with some of their... here's another one. So let's make sure we get some of these wrappings too. And we'll do this just like we did on the last one. See, we'll focus on that bottom part of it, leave the top. That's where our highlight's gonna go. And let's make that a touch lighter. Let's see if we can't give this a bit more texture on these horns. But see, we have that substructure underneath. So when we add these, they just sort of play off of that. We had nothing there for the longest time, and now we just created a little bit of extra texture. Don't want to hit that side. Oh, we gotta get a few of these horns here. And I know there's folks that they can't work with messy palettes and stuff. They have a thing about everything being all tidy, and well, I apologize for that, because tidy palettes when we were in art school, that was I don't want to say it drew scorn, but that was not a thing. We'll leave it at that. We'll just leave it there. It is not really necessary for survival. I can see why it's important for folks. There is a method to the madness, though. I know it may not look it, but there is a little bit of organizational process that happens on the palette. It is not just any old way. And just adding one more layer of highlights there. So that had absolutely no texture on there. Now we got texture. I'm just going to do a quick little check on one of our finished guys here. So we did do pupils, and we do have sort of a glow on that. Here's the other thing I want to put in there too, on that final details thing. See that grayish color there in the shadow areas? We're going to do some of that as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to set it for that final segment. And where's our blood for the blood god here? We'll give this a try. We're going to see what the heck happens. We're going to shake the heck out of this thing, and we'll try it next. I think I've shaken this thing up as good as I can. So I'll give it one last shake, and let's get this out here. Now, I think you've seen me use the blood effects, other blood effects before, so I'm going to try to find one of my little pipettes right here, and we'll just do this the easy way. See, I got myself a little container right there. Or maybe not such an easy way. This stuff's pretty thick. Okay. Wow. Like I said, I have not used this before. Wow, that's okay, so it's really thick. Not a bad thing. So we're just going to take it out of here with the brush. Don't need a ton of it. Now the thing is, we like to have blood that's different colors, as far as some's lighter, some's darker. Now all of those things, I got those put away. Wow, that really is thick. See that little big old blob hanging off the end there? I'm going to actually not use this big brush. We're going to find something smaller here. This is a little bit of a craft brush there. Now you can really see. Look at that. So it's thick. The thing is, it is just sort of one color. So here we go. See what we just did there? We're going to find out now just how translucent it is. And is it going to run all over the place? So those were my goals, to find out those two things. I think it's going to retain its gloss. Because remember when we tried using the blood effects, that did not retain. Well, it's not glossy to begin with, so there's no glossiness to retain. Alright, it's interesting now. What I might also do is have another brush handy just to get the residue off of the top parts of the skull, or even just move it around, kind of smear it a little bit. Alright, see there's a couple of recessed areas here that I'm really jonesing to get this down in there. I think you can't, now you can see it. So this is, see right here, just trying to drop that down in there. You can only take a dot of it at a time, so it's not the fastest process in the world. So we did that. Now let's see if we can wipe some of it away, which we can. Good to know. So I feel like I've already learned something here. So maybe this is something that I incorporate with, say, the other couple of blood types that you've seen me use. Not the secret weapon, but the, was that fresh blood? I think the badger airbrush coat, or the ghost tint. That's interesting. So it's interesting how that thick stuff will actually get down into crevices if you guide it down in there. You gotta guide it down in there though. So I'm gonna do that. So I can get my finger in there and wipe some of that away. Alright, this was a fun experiment. I just happened to be looking through the drawer looking for something else, and I saw this and I thought, is there any way I can try and use this in some way that is different from what I would normally do? Okay, that is interesting. Now, of course, you know me, I like to have sort of the coagulated blood color, which means it's darker. It's fun sort of being able to fill up the skulls, their eyeballs with this stuff, and their skulls with holes in their heads. Well, skull is a head. I think you know where we're going with that. Now, you can't really see what I'm doing down there, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. Here's the hole where I had to kind of drill this thing in to make it fit, so yay. That's one way to distract from that. Now let us compare one to the other. So yeah, that's okay. That is, I think it's definitely worth that little extra bit. Why not? Yeah, that's fun. So now that we know this sort of works, well, we'll find some other things to do this on. I'm sure there's some other kind of a, maybe even just a basing thing. Maybe there's actually not even a miniature on it. But we'll see if we can use this in maybe an even broader way to get even more kind of like a blood pool going. Alright, let's do our other one here. And it looks like I put out just enough to get both of these pretty well covered. Alright, look at that. That is It's kind of fun. I've never done anything like this before, ever, period. And darn near 20 years of painting miniatures since it is 2019. There's a first time for everything. And as you know, I try these days to capture as many of those first time things live on camera, because this way I have no more idea than you do. Well, actually, you might have a better idea than I do of what's going to happen. So here, that skull is just completely covered up. I want to see, first of all, can I remove it? Oh, what the heck? Makeup sponge. Oh, yeah, that's actually a little easier. So, let's try this. I'm just really going to sock this in here. So instead of being quite so careful, we're going to take a different route. I'm just going to really blast this in there. If it doesn't work, who cares? So we piled that in, and now we're going to look at that. Yeah, I got a couple of sponges handy. So I think, yeah, it does remove it. Well, it's obviously taken enough away. Oh, let's get down in the center. But I'm going to go back to a more, well, at least somewhat more careful route here. I got some really deep crevices on this one. And it is the perfect way to mask where the feet attach to the base. There might even be, I don't think I see, I think I pretty well had the pin hidden, but this is, I guess, a good way, maybe, if you've got the pins exposed, a way to get rid of that, make it less visible. Okay, well, I'm glad I tried this out. I wasn't really sure at first what might happen, and who knows, it may sink, but it doesn't really seem too much like it is. Now, oh, what the heck, what do I have to lose? Let's try it on the axe heads here. And what I'm going to do, I think you can see, I'm literally scraping it off. And then we're doing, see these little bit of spatter lines here. And to me, this is another one of those less is more moments. Since this is so thick, I'm trying to actually get that to somewhat pile up on the end and then radiate it out from there, but also trying to use, it is transparent, so instead of trying to go with just thinning it down, see, if I just brush it like that, it's sort of naturally thinner. Now I'm gonna go, oh, what the heck, I'm gonna take some of that Achillean green and mix it in here, and let's see if we can get a darker, oh, we do get a darker blood color out of that. Alright, so that answers that. Now it's going to dull down in that area right there. It's going to dull down the blood. It's not going to be quite so shiny there. But I can just go over that with some gloss coat. So I'm going to take some of that darker mix and maybe go around the edges of this. Like so. So okay, that was a successful test. I'm not going to do it on both of these. I'll just do it on the one. I think that gives you a fairly good idea what we did there. All I did was, you could have added Leviathan blue, would have done the same thing. So nifty. Very nifty. But what we'll do is we're gonna, oh, you know what? I'm gonna go back to one of these brushes first here real quick. We were talking about adding that, just that little bit of grayishness right there. Let's see if we can't do that. So I'm gonna take this off the palette here, get that out of the way. And I'll just do this on a few, because again, it's a pretty long video. And what am I looking for? I'm just looking to make a grayish color here. I want to make sure I still have some of my red though. So that's some of the Achillean green. It's got to be on the darker side. What do we have? What have we got here? Looks like that is about what I wanted. There we are. So instead of everything just being that same red, this is, I think, is a good spot for it. Look at that. See how that just goes down into that crevice there, into that shadow area. So now it's not just a darker red. There's something more there. What is this like? It's almost like putting the greens and purples in, say, a normal human skin tone. That's effectively what we're doing there. Yeah, as neat as it is to have that deeper red everywhere, I think this just adds a little more interest to it. Now let's do eyeballs real quick. And this is the trickiest bit right here. This is where I really wish I had stuff like my brown liner paint and everything else. We're just gonna have to make something work. This is the flesh tear red, some of the Leviathan blue. Let's see if we can't give him some else. So we darken this down just like we would normally with eyes over the eyebrow, and then add an eye. We do the same on this side, add an eye. So now he's looking at us. Oh, what the heck. See if I can clean this out and potentially maybe add... Here, let's see if this works for it. Remember we were talking about that? Since that makes it more of a, basically a wash. Let's see. Let's see what we get. Can you... yeah. And... there we go. So that's helpful. Yeah, look at that. Okay. So we learned there is a purpose for that sort of, that mecha, whatever. Let's see. This is another, I think, a decent one here where you can see what I'm trying to do with the eyes. So there we go. I see there's a little bit of an expression. He's actually looking off somewhere. So that worked out good. That worked out well. So yeah, that stuff's not too bad. So I like that. What I will do then is maybe on some of the Song Ice and Fire, well, anywhere else that I've got blood stuff to do, we'll try using that and we'll see how it works. Well, what I will do is I'll just say thanks again for everybody for supporting the Army Painter pledge level, because it makes this, as you can see, it makes these kind of not just experiments, but different things that doing with the units, you know, with basing, trying out some different materials. I wouldn't have even tried any of this GW stuff if it hadn't been people asking, hey, can you try some GW stuff for me? Just so I can see how you might use it, and then how I could possibly use it. Now, I've actually got 2 Army painting series that'll be 2, potentially 3, all kind of running at the same time. So they may not be quite so chronological as this. You may get 1 or 2 episodes of one series and then 1 or 2 episodes of another. There's just an awful lot of units that need to be done. And as I said, I've got those Necrons there. And I thought that would be fun with, it will be the first, well, may not be the first. It might be one of 2 army painting series that run with metallics. What is that, the true metallics, the TMM, right? Looking to do some of that. So see, we'll put, see, so some of those nice little glaze there. See, that ties the horns and this together because we put the same glaze on either side of that border, if you want to call it that. Now back to our dark paint. We'll just do this one last guy here and see if we can't get some eyes on him for you as we head out. Thanks again for watching. If you can drop a like on this, that would be great. It would be really handy. And I will catch you on Series 11. Thanks again.